This is the breakout session on affordable housing and use of CPACE financing and affordable housing specifically. My name is Deb Taylor. I'm the CEO of Texas PACE Authority, and we'll be moderating our panel of two. And I'm going to introduce our panelists in a minute. So the format today, I'm going to start with some kind of icebreaker questions and test audience participation. So be ready for that. Yeah, there goes Lisa. And then we're going to hear, I think, first from our first speaker, Carlton, with his experience both in the commercial asset side and then affordable housing, and then move on to Michelle with some practical applications of CPACE and affordable housing. So that's kind of how we'll run this. This is going to be pretty informal, no slides, so more of conversation. So if you do have questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand and stop us along the way if you need clarification. So first, as Carlton sitting next to me, let me introduce him first, read a little bit of his bio. So Carlton is a graduate of Princeton University School of Architecture and Urban Planning. He co-founded Full Spectrum of New York in 1983, a firm that was recognized as a national leader in the development of affordable, green, and smart buildings in emerging urban markets and focused on creative, restorative human settlements. He developed over 1,000 DU of mixed income and affordable housing in emerging urban markets. He's responsible for the development of over 3 million square feet of corporate space for AT&T, one of the founders of the green building movement in the United States. And he has provided economic development, planning consulting services in a number of states and cities, including Charlotte, North Carolina, Nashville, Louisville, Birmingham, Springfield, Massachusetts, New Orleans, Anchorage, and St. Louis. So thanks for joining us, Carlton. And next to Carlton is Michelle Patel. Michelle is with Counterpoint. She is the managing director and heads principal transactions and retrofit commercial PACE transactions. She leads Counterpoint's team focused on commercial PACE financing with a focus on new construction development, transitional and rehab investments. Dr. Patel provides an expertise in deep energy retrofits and a passion for advancing projects with community benefits that provide accretive economics for owners. She serves as a liaison to Department of Energy, Better Buildings, the National Academy of Medicine as part of its Climate Collaborative. So two great panelists here today. And before we turn it over to Carlton to share his thoughts, this is Lisa's audience participation section. All right, so this is a quiz. This is affordable housing. And affordable housing means that there are different structures, there are different entities involved, different stakeholders, and different terms and acronyms. All right, so first one's a softball. What does the acronym HUD, all caps, stand for? Anyone? All right, good. And that stands for HUD. All right. Okay. HUD. Housing and Urban Development, U.S. Housing and Urban Development, HUD. Next one, CAPS, NOAH. Who's heard of this? NOAH. Anyone in the audience? There you go. Natural occurring affordable housing. That was actually a term that I had heard once, but didn't know there was an acronym for it until Michelle wrote me an email and said NOAA, and I was like, what is this? So, all right, next acronym. I'll say the letters, but it's usually pronounced as a word. LIHTC. LIHTC. All right, and there are two versions that are numbers. What are the two versions? 9 and 4. Excellent. All right. An educated audience. Next, HTC.
Historic tax credit.
All right. Lisa got that. Next, NMTC. There we go. New market. All right. PHA. Public housing authorities. All right. We're almost to the end. AMI. Very important in the affordable housing context.
Area median
All right. And CRA. There we go. All right. Okay. The audience is participating. All right. We got them engaged. So Carlton, let me turn it over to you. And Carlton and I visited, and one of the things he shared is he has experience in commercial real estate projects, not affordable, and not that anything is easy, but he said that's pretty easy. He said affordable housing is different. And so with that setup, let me let you describe what you're talking about there, Carlton.
Okay. For the early part of my career, I was in commercial real estate, doing office buildings and shopping centers and stuff like that, which was pretty simple, some equity, some debt, maybe some mezz debt and some loans, and it was done. And we did a lot of those deals, right? And at some point in life, I decided, well, was this meaningful? Did it really make a real difference? And for me, that answer was no, it didn't make a difference. So I wanted to get more focused on developing and investing in disinvested communities, right? And I used to tell people, my former life, I tried to invest and develop at the intersection of Maine and Maine. In my new life, I invested and developed in the intersection of nowhere and nowhere. And so it was those places where it was most difficult to bring capital, right? But where there was the deepest need. And so when we started doing this work, I found that there were just a lot of shortcomings in it, right? And the shortcomings, in large part, were because the complexity of financing these deals. And so what people tended to do is take the easiest route through complex financing, right? And so if you take a typical deal that we would do, though it's all sort of generally considered affordable housing, what we really do is mixed income housing. So in a typical project of ours, we're building in cities, we're building higher density. So in a typical project of ours, it would have a segment of it that would be low income, which would be someplace between 30 and 60% of AMI for that particular market. We would have another tranche that it would be 20 to 30% of the units that would be between 60 and 80%. And then we would have another tranche that would be market rate, which would be anything 125 and above, right? And so, and then there also typically at the base a retail piece, right? And so depending on what financing you use, right, for a multifamily residential building, you could have 3 condominiums or 4 condominiums, right? A low-income condominium, a middle-income condominium, a market rate condominium, and a retail condominium. All of them with different requirements and different tranches of financing with complex requirements that all compete with each other, right? And so your job was to find a way to get all the lawyers talking to each other, trying to get all the public agencies talking to each other, and to make those things work. And we did not think that was complex enough. So we decided that we wanted to early on start doing housing that was green. And at that time, green was just like, well, it must cost too much, right? We had been doing a project at Battery Park City, which is the high rent district, right? And cost was really not an issue there, but we were going to do a project in Harlem where cost was an issue. And so what we started to really think about is the process of the designing the building in concert with designing the finance, right? So understanding where the limits of the financing for each tranche was, right? And so in New York, there was NYSERDA that could help you in some cases, right? But in some cases, it didn't really help on the financing because it was a reimbursement after you had incurred the cost, right? And so there were challenges there. And if you got mezz to cover it, the mezz was so expensive, it was like, why did you get the money, right? And so over time, these things have gotten a little bit simpler. Right now, when I think about the work we're doing now, we're doing a large project in Atlanta. It's a 14-acre site. about 300 yards from the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is sort of downtown Atlanta. When it's completed, there'll be about 3,500 residential units and about 200,000 square feet of retail and about 100,000 square feet of office, right? And so on that project, we have some performance objectives that one, we're completely decarbonizing. Two, we're building to passive house standards. And three, we are trying to build this as a deeply mixed income unit development. So the things we're starting to look at include PACE financing. They include something called TAD, which is a TIF, of tax increment financing, that's in Atlanta is called TAD. It includes low-income housing tax credit. There's a new market tax credit piece of it, and there is an historic building that we have to restore, which was the first building built on an African-American campus during the Civil War. At that time, it was Atlanta University, and it was Gaines Hall. It was started in 1866. It's pretty much in a state, it's a ruin at this point. And so there's new market, historic tax credits involved in it. So trying to find a way to make all these projects, all these different sources of financing work is one of the challenges. One of the things we're starting to look at that sort of reduces, we think, our equity requirement on a portion of it is using CPACE, because we can still get the tax credits from the state of New York, state of Georgia, that comes out to roughly $14,000 per dwelling unit. And in this first building, there are 380 dwelling units. So that's like $5 or $6 million that we can sort of take off the primary capital stack and put into a CPACE financing. So we just started working on that, trying to figure out the mechanics of that, and having our attorneys talk to the same attorneys that are doing the low-income housing tax credit, that are doing the new market tax credit, and trying to figure that out. So the thing that is the real challenge is, because there's no single source for financing these deals, right? You have to keep going, and it's an iterative process that you go back and forth, and if nothing else, the most important things is having a law firm, right, that really grasp all these deals, all these pieces of finance. Because if I had to have 4 different law firms on this, one on low-income housing tax credits, one on the bond financing, one on the CPACE, it would just be too much to manage. So for us, the engineering, the design is really not the hurdle. It's really getting this labyrinth, this complex labyrinth of public and private finance together and meeting all the legal restraints for those things that have to be done. And so the challenge is, for us, when we talk to people about, have you done this before? People say, no, we haven't done this in Georgia. It's too complex. Why are you doing it? Well, for us, because we have these really high performance standards that we think are important. We might be the last developer in America that believes climate change is real, right? We might be the last developer that believes that you have to build to climate conditions. If we're building buildings that we think have a 50-year half-life, we need to be building to something that will perform well in 2050 or 2060, and not just at the end of a 20 or 30-year mortgage, right? And if you're going to do that, you have to build differently. So everything we are doing is we're building differently. In Atlanta, we're building with mass timber from a local provider that's really 3 hours away in Alabama, and they are making it with all southern yellow pine, which is all across the area. We're prefabricating the bathrooms and kitchens, so they go in larger chunks. We're prefabricating the exterior envelopes, right? And we've done all these things except the lumber. We've never built with CLT before, but all the prefabrication and those sort of things we've done before. This reduces our costs, reduces our time frame, reduces our interest carry, and it improves our building performance, right? Without really paying differential costs for those building increased performances. So trying to make the financing work for that, that's the thing that we stay awake at night, every night, trying to figure that out. And so one of the reasons I've been here at this conference is to talk to people like yourselves and let you tell me, how do you really do this? Because for us, PACE financing is a really new thing. Mary has convinced me that I really can use it, to make it happen. So that's my PACE story as it integrates into our complex financing schemes that we're trying to figure out how to work.
Right. Thanks, Carlton. Okay, so Carlton says he doesn't need 5 lawyers or 8 lawyers. He needs a lawyer that understands how these things integrate. I know there's some here in the room even. On the panel, we don't have a lawyer, but we have a doctor who understands systems and how things work. So Michelle, how do you thread that needle by integrating PACE into an already complex capital stack with lots of requirements and lots of oversight?
So affordable housing really serves the legislative mandate of PACE as like a $2 bed and you win the trifecta. You're getting housing, which is clearly on the minds of every city planning commission, as well as advancing the energy efficiency. It has been an elusive goal, mostly because these deals are hard to pencil out at market rate financing, which PACE usually is. So PACE for retrofits in affordable housing is proven. We have 2 deals that we've closed with HUD consent, regulated, age-restricted housing, but it was retrofit. They had generated revenues and they could make the PACE payments. And these were renewable projects that lowered operating costs to further make the deals pencil out. We have found that for regulated affordable housing, it is tough to integrate the PACE into it because they have access to cheaper capital. There are exceptions. So we have a project that is got a commercial element being built in addition to regulated housing. And that is allowing the property as a whole to generate the revenues that will the PACE will be accretive at a market rate. And because it has the commercial component, even though the regulated affordable housing, it is regulated, it is not qualifying for the normal subsidies and incentives that a restricted property would be, that kind of financing. That is an atypical situation. So NOAA, or naturally occurring affordable housing that is not subject to a regulatory agreement, I think is the bread and butter of PACE. In 2019, we went through our data tape. Data tape is an Excel worksheet that lists the metrics of every deal that you have closed. Your coupon, your weighted average life, yada, yada, all the way through. And then you update it every quarter with marks. Our data tape also includes all the energy metrics. We've reduced this much kilowatts, this much therms, this much greenhouse gas. And we went back in 2019 with the craze about ESG, trying to think how we were going to quantify the S and the G, if that became something that we needed to incorporate into our data tape. So we retrospectively went through all the deals we had closed, trying to evaluate how are we going to quantify S and G for our data tape, and found that almost every multifamily we had closed had an affordable component to it. And that these were deals that because the revenue being generated by the property was lower than a Class A multifamily that was having all market rents, these developers had taken the initiative to find PACE and had done their homework, and that we found almost every new build multifamily we did had a certain component, they were all doing it for density and getting more units and all of the regular developer reasons, but that was a part of every multifamily that we had closed. So just unknowingly, we were supporting affordable housing by being a low cost capital that was just happening naturally because these developers were finding us out. We do have one affordable housing story that is a PACE deal that was featured in the New York Times. And I know, like, I don't think the industry picked up on this, but
Featured in a good way.
featured in a great way. And we didn't lose any money on it.
This guy.
So this was a building that was its own as a cooperative. The first floor was businesses. So there's a commercial kitchen for teaching people how to do ghost kitchens that were training chefs to go out into the world and do the trucks and other things, to do food for trucks. So it was job training. There was a child care center that would take care of your children. And the first floor was $500 a year for anyone in the community that could join in order to get this kind of training. The second floor had similar type social minded, but just available to the cooperative in these two buildings. That $500 a year revenue supported the upper two levels, which were 60% AMI restricted. And it was a self-generating ecosystem, if you will, that the first two levels of revenue were supporting reduced rents in the upper two levels. Brilliant experimental design. They're making their PACE payments. And there obviously is a huge demand for the rental because you've got childcare in the building. There's also a WeWork kind of situation. And all of this is part of the cooperative for $500 a year. You have access to all of these buildings. The build cost of this building exceeded the stabilized valuation. How we got this past investment committee, I have no idea, because this was a high efficiency building. There was a green roof. There was high efficiency snow melting. This predates Passive House, but they would have done that if they wanted. There was really a focused, there's solar panels. They're not completely all on-site power generation, but there's a real, I think this is a landmark kind of project that will perhaps provide a solution for a lot of the problems that are facing our cities. And it's just very inventive. PACE, because of the nature of our security, we were able to, we did 25% of the LTC of the build cost on it. Even given the fact that it was a cooperative ownership. I have a conservative this was not a Mass Mutual deal, but I had a very conservative investment committee at the time, and it worked. So I think we have power in the PACE community to finance these projects that I think would be declined by every construction lender in the United States. And it is a wonderful opportunity to really fulfill the legislative mandate that they gave us when they enabled PACE at the state level.
Great. Michelle, you mentioned HUD and low cost of capital. For new construction, right? HUD is like 80%.
We haven't penciled out with any of the 221B programs. It just hasn't worked. We've come close on a couple LIHTC deals, but they've had there's a significant commercial component also in the development.
Yep. Okay. So there is a process for HUD approval for PACE, and it's takes a little bit of time. If Charlene Heidinger, who is the founding president of Texas PACE Authority, was here, she'll be here later, but she would tell you that this occupied about 4 years of her life. at the headquarters level, and Bob Iver has been part of these conferences before, very supportive from the federal guidance standpoint, but ultimately the approval and delegation for HUD rests with the administrators at the regional level. And this is not all they do. In fact, this is not even on their radar. And with changeover in administrators, which is what we found, there wasn't pushback necessarily. It's just that, they didn't really understand what was being asked of them. And so things it took forever. So seriously, it's a 4-year process. One of the prerequisites was that we secured a ruling from our state attorney general that a PACE assessment is essentially a governmental assessment equal to a real estate tax, validating that the authorization in the statute makes it that versus a second mortgage. And so we did that. There's a process there because those AG opinion requests can only come from local government. So we had a local government that made the request to clarify this. So that all went through, and eventually we did get conditional approval. We have not done a project yet with HUD, but the structure is there. The co-benefit, however, and this is outside of affordable housing directly, but still beneficial, is that AG letter speaks generally to the Attorney General's view of PACE as an assessment versus another construct. That has been hugely helpful in conversations with senior lenders and banks that question that. And now we have an AG opinion that supports the fact that a PACE assessment is a special governmental assessment as authorized in the statute. So that was kind of an unintended beneficial consequence of the whole HUD process. But that is a required step. All right, so we've got about 15 minutes. This is kind of a little bit of a rapid session here. Questions from anyone in the audience on use of CPACE for affordable housing, regulated, NOAA? You remember what NOAA means? From anyone? Questions, anyone?
On this AG letter.
Yes.
That has to come from local, from the HUD locally there. I mean, so if I was going to do the Pacific Northwest, they would have to file it on playing nice, I guess, with CPACE.
With the regional HUD administrator.
Yeah. So I'm based on our experience and making an assumption here that it would be the Attorney General of the state of Washington, right, that would render an opinion supporting the fact that a PACE assessment is a special governmental assessment, and that would satisfy that requirement. That's the way our process works in Texas.
So they're usually approving a program.
Program, correct.
And Washington State has a separate county program. There's no statewide. Because you have a different program in every county or city, but Texas PACE is the authorized representative. Did the AG, were they comfortable with that because you had standardization between your documents? Because really you had a separate program for every county.
So the AG opinion and the HUD conditional approval were tied together, but two different things. So the AG opinion addressed PACE generally, any PACE transaction, right? The conditional HUD approval was for our program structure and, administered in a certain way, in a uniform way, regardless of the city or the county.
Okay,
Yes.
so the AG opinion is on the enabling statute and not on the structure of the program
Correct.
per se.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good, because otherwise he'd have to get a separate opinion for every county.
Yes, yeah. Any other questions? All right.
Has a deal actually closed in Texas that
HUD
way?
deal, a HUD deal or?
A HUD deal with PACE on it.
No, not yet. Yeah, we've had a couple that were in the pipeline and proposed, and I think in one case it wound up being, I think HUD their cost of money was considerably lower, and so they wound up going like 100% with HUD. We've had a couple of repurposing and retrofit projects that have all of the complexity you described that are looking at it as well.
We have just started that process with our attorney there. And what we're trying to do is essentially use the energy rebates from the state to repay the PACE loan. But the timing of it, when you get those things, the extent of it, can it be stretched out? Because there are all these prepayment penalties and all those sort of things, and trying to figure out, though you're gonna get this cash, is it really useful in structuring the PACE financing? So I certainly don't know the answer to that one yet, but which is, I guess, a legal issue. Have you had experience with that?
Yeah, it's all in, so PACE is really flexible.
Mhm.
It is, in my mind, much more flexible than was even contemplated back in 2010. The call protection and all can be structured. So right now, most of the money at PACE comes from life insurance companies, so they want long dated paper. So they're asking for 10 years of call protection, but not all of them are like that. And PACE itself, that's just not everyone is structuring it that way, and then the PACE itself can be structured in many different ways.
This is good work.
Yeah, you can't do, especially when you're doing affordable, your margins are so,
Yeah.
the money's so tight,
Yeah.
and especially in this rate environment,
Yeah.
you can't be paying, 2-point exit fee or something. It'll kill the entire deal.
It doesn't make any sense.
It's dead in the water. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's dead. So there are workarounds, and PACE by nature is extremely flexible with all of that.
So
Yes, sir.
back to the HUD piece, so if your program allow a longer AM, but maybe up to like 35 years, in the case of the program in Texas, that's one of the advantages. Obviously.
Yeah, so the program structure, we have the AM's not predetermined, right? It's tied to average weighted useful life of the project elements that are being financed. So depending on what it is, right? If it's large fiscal plant or more permanent building envelope improvements that have 80, 100-year life, that can stretch that further if necessary. Yeah, but it does. We look at the weighted useful life of the overall project.
So obviously, PACE is going to be more expensive than HUD, but trying to figure out the AM piece and the interest piece together.
Yep.
Why it potentially could be an advantage for like one.
PACE will definitely be more expensive than HUD, but it is really flexible, and there's a wide range of rates because it's provided by private capital. So it depends who's entering and who's providing the capital. I mean, there are nonprofits that take advantage of PACE. So it just depends where the capital's coming from and the structure and the perceived risk and how it's priced.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, when you all talk about HUD, there's a lot of HUD programs. You talk about FHA insured mortgages. That consenting.
Yeah, 221. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
FHA.
yeah. Paper, federal paper. Yeah.
So those, I don't know that those rates are really that much lower. The FHA insurance helps the lender, finances for the lender, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a low cost for you.
I think a lot of developers come because they want to put less equity in, and they think that the PACE is going to decrease the equity requirement, and it won't. And so then there's no really accretive reason to add the PACE if you're going to get 80% already.
Yeah, the HUD loans will give you more money, more dollars.
Yeah.
90%.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think,
It'll give you a longer term also.
Longer organization and, yeah, term, but I'm not sure that the mortgage, the rates are, they're just bank loans that have FHA. But I don't know.
It would be significant.
At the end of the day, they tend to be lower,
the main advantage, when people come to us for financing and they're contemplating HUD and they're weighing it, I usually hear, "You're faster."
The HUD is
Yeah,
forever.
that's-
And
yeah.
can I
It's a
pay you off when HUD
3
finally
years,
comes through?
Yeah, that's one thing with all the 220, all those programs,
Allocations.
the allocations.
Yeah.
If you don't have 3 years to mess around, you probably want to do something else.
Yeah, so they're looking to pay it off in 3 years,
Mhm.
but at least they don't have to wait. We have an affordable project right now. It's already approved by HUD. That HUD will be our takeout.
Yeah, this is not affordable, but addressing kind of the timing issue. HUD, that timeline kind of, it is what it is. It's been that way for a while. We have 3 projects that involve USDA, and they're in a bit of disarray right now. And so the PACE lender actually stepped in and arranged bridge financing that's going to be taken out by USDA once that surfaces again. So there's kind of opportunity to pair things that way. All right, any more questions
So
from the audience?
it's part of the broader conversation of multifamily and agency GSE financing is it's not really affordable, but Freddie, Fannie, and all of that. So the last I checked, and maybe somebody knows more, Fannie was not coming out with guidance and was not real favorable towards FACE, but Freddie is. And so Freddie will not consent to PACE, but they won't make you pay it off. And given the recent reversal by SBA, that SBA used to allow PACE on a property, and now they rescinded it last year, that I think that is pretty strong from the GSEs, that Freddie actually is advocating for PACE. They just can't get consent from the mothership because it opens up the door to consent for residential PACE. And so they're just letting it lie for now.
Well, we got a couple of minutes. Any closing comments? Carlton?
Help. The only closing comment I would say is when you're in the sort of affordable workforce housing space, one of the things that you just learn to do after a few minutes is you really have to dig deep and explore every source of financing, because the capital stacks are really complex, they're hard to put together, and the rules change, right? And so in addition to looking at PACE, one of the things that has certainly probably in the last 2 years appeared is a lot of concessionary financing that is coming from a combination of philanthropy and institutional investors where they sort of co-invest in projects. And there have been several of those done around the country where it reduces your cost of capital, because in this affordable space, you can't reduce the cost of bricks. You can't reduce the cost of concrete, right? The only thing you can really focus on is trying to find ways to reduce the cost of capital, right? Because a brick for me costs the same thing as a brick for anyone else. And so that's the one thing in this space, you're always trying to manage your cost of capital.
CLT, no bricks.
Right. Local CLT, no import duties.
Oh.
Michelle, any closing thoughts?
I thank everyone for your attention.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we're wrapping up a bit early. Thanks for your attention. And I guess there's a break, looks like, and then a next session starts at, I guess, in probably 15 minutes. Schedule. So thanks for joining us. Yeah.
That we're doing this development is very similar.